The Rolls Royce Phantom looked completely out of place on 25th Street. October 7th, 1954. Chrome bumpers gleaming against the backdrop of Harlem's brownstone buildings. Theodore Teddy Blackstone III, heir to the Blackstone steel fortune, worth an estimated $47 million, was about to do something no white millionaire had ever done in Harlem history. He was about to beg. The morning had started normally for Bumpy Johnson. Coffee at Small's Paradise, reviewing the previous night's numbers, planning the day's business. Then his lieutenant Marcus rushed in with urgent news. "Boss, there's a white man in a Rolls Royce asking for you. Says his name is Blackstone. Says it's life or death." Bumpy knew the name well. Steel mills in Pittsburgh, shipping contracts with the Navy, political connections to the White House. Old money, the kind of money that didn't come to Harlem asking for favor. But there Teddy Blackstone stood, 34 years old, Harvard educated, wearing a $1,000 suit, and a look of desperation. His hands were shaking. When Bumpy walked into the back room of Small's Paradise, Blackstone was pacing. "Miss Johnson, thank you for seeing me," Blackstone said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I desperately need your help." Bumpy sat down slowly, studying the man across from him. "Mr. Blackstone, what could a man like me possibly do for a man like you?" Blackstone's composed facade crumpled entirely. "They took my daughter." The words hung heavy in the air. Bumpy leaned forward. "Who took your daughter?" "Vincent Torrino. My daughter Catherine is only 19 years old. She was supposed to be at Vassar, but she fell in love with some jazz musician. She's been coming to nightclubs in the village, places she had no business being." Bumpy knew Vincent Torrino well. Small-time operator, trying to make a name for himself by pushing into territories that didn't belong to him. Dangerous, but ultimately stupid. What does Torrino want? $2 million, cash, by midnight tonight. Or, Blackstone couldn't finish the sentence. "You've got $2 million, Mr. Blackstone. Why come to me?" Blackstone laughed bitterly. "You think I haven't tried everything? I called the FBI. They said kidnapping is a federal crime, but they need time to investigate. Time I don't have. I called the police. They suggested I pay the ransom, and hope for the best. I even tried to contact Torrino directly through intermediaries. He won't negotiate." Bumpy lit a cigar, thinking. "Still doesn't explain why you're here." "Because everyone I've talked to said the same thing." Blackstone looked directly at Bumpy. "They said if someone has a problem that can't be solved through conventional means, there's only one man in New York who can handle it. They said Vincent Torrino is only afraid of one person. Bumpy Johnson. What makes you think I'd help you?" Bumpy asked. Blackstone reached into his jacket and pulled out a pre-written check for $500,000. "This is yours if you bring my daughter home safely." Bumpy glanced at the check, but didn't touch it. "Mr. Blackstone, this isn't about money. Your daughter is 19 years old. She doesn't deserve what Torrino is putting her through." Blackstone looked confused for the first time. "Then you'll help?" "I'll consider it. But if I handle this, it gets handled my way. No police, no FBI, no lawyers, and you don't ask questions about how it happened." Blackstone nodded frantically. "Yes, absolutely. Whatever you need." Bumpy stood up. "After tonight, this conversation never happened. My name stays out of it." Agreed. Bumpy walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "Mr. Blackstone, I'm not doing this for your money. I'm doing it because Vincent Torrino made a mistake. He brought his business into my city without permission. Your daughter just happens to be caught in the middle." What Blackstone didn't know was that Bumpy had been planning to deal with Torrino anyway. 3 weeks earlier, Torrino had tried to muscle in on a numbers operation in the Bronx. The week after that, he'd approached several Harlem nightclub owners about protection service. Now he was kidnapping socialites. Torrino was drawing dangerous attention to activities that worked best in the shadows. But the kidnapping changed everything. This wasn't just business anymore. This was personal. Bumpy's intelligence network operated like a precision machine. Within 2 hours he knew everything there was to know about Vincent Torrino's current operation. Where he lived, where he worked, who he worked with, and most importantly, where he was holding Catherine Blackstone. The location was a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. Torrino had 4 men with him. They were armed, but they weren't professionals. They were street thugs trying to play in a league far beyond their capabilities. Most importantly, one of his men, Joey Marchetti, owed Bumpy a substantial favor from a gambling debt that had been quietly forgiven 6 months earlier. Joey had been feeding Bumpy detailed information about Torrino's operation since the very beginning. At exactly 7:15 p.m., Bumpy walked through the warehouse front door alone. No weapons visible, hands casually in his pocket, looking for all the world like a man taking an evening stroll through his own neighborhood. Torrino was expecting resistance. He was expecting a war. He was expecting anything except Bumpy Johnson walking in like he owned the place. "Vincent," Bumpy said calmly, "we need to talk." Torrino jumped up from a card table where he'd been playing poker with his men. "Johnson, how the hell did you find us? That's not important. What's important is that you took something that doesn't belong to you, and now you're going to give it back." "Like hell I am." Torrino pulled out a .38 revolver, his hands trembling slightly. "The girl stays put until I get my money. $2 million. That's the deal." Bumpy looked around the warehouse calmly. Catherine Blackstone was tied to a chair in the corner, blindfolded but apparently unharmed. All 4 men now had their guns drawn, pointed directly at Bumpy. "Vincent, let me explain something to you," Bumpy said, his voice never changing tone. "There are certain lines you don't cross in this city. Kidnapping civilian girls for ransom is one of those lines. Screw your rules, Johnson. This is business." Bumpy nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right. This is business, and business has consequences." He looked directly at Joey Marchetti. "Joey, show Mr. Torrino what happens to people who don't understand the rules." Joey looked confused for a split second. Then understanding dawned on his face. He turned his gun away from Bumpy and pointed it directly at Torrino. "Joey, what the hell are you doing?" Torrino screamed in disbelief. "What I should have done weeks ago," Joey said quietly. "Mr. Johnson, what do you want me to do with him?" The other 3 men were looking around frantically, not sure who to point their guns at anymore. The carefully planned kidnapping had just collapsed in seconds. "Nobody needs to get hurt here," Bumpy said calmly. "Vincent, you're going to untie the girl. You're going to apologize to her for this ordeal. Then you're going to walk out of this warehouse and never set foot in New York again. If you're smart, you'll keep walking until you reach the West Coast. And if I refuse," Bumpy smiled, but there was no warmth whatsoever in it. "Then Joey shoots you. Then my men shoot the other 3. Then this warehouse disappears like it never existed. And tomorrow morning, Theodore Blackstone reads in the newspapers that his daughter was rescued by unknown parties, and the kidnappers were never found." The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. Vincent Torrino looked around the room, desperately calculating his rapidly diminishing options. 5 guns pointed in different directions. His own man had betrayed him. His backup plan had evaporated, and Bumpy Johnson was standing there looking like none of this surprised him at all. "This isn't over, Johnson," Torrino said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes it is," Bumpy replied quietly. Torrino untied Catherine Blackstone with visibly shaking hands. She was crying softly, but she was alive and unharmed. As soon as she was free, Tommy escorted her outside to a waiting car that would take her home safely. "Vincent," Bumpy said as Torrino headed for the door, "one more thing. The next time you think about coming to New York, remember this exact moment. Remember how easily your own people turned against you. Remember how quickly your master plan fell apart." At exactly 9:30 p.m., Bumpy returned Catherine Blackstone to her father at his 5th Avenue mansion. She was shaken and traumatized, but physically unharmed. Teddy Blackstone was waiting anxiously in his study, pacing frantically. When he saw his daughter walk through the door alive and safe, Theodore Blackstone III did something that no one who knew him would have believed possible. He fell to his knees. "Mr. Johnson," he said, tears streaming down his face, "I don't know how to thank you. I don't know how you did it, but you saved my daughter's life. If there's anything at all that I can ever do for you." Bumpy looked down at the millionaire kneeling on his own expensive Persian rug. "Mr. Blackstone, there is something you can do for me. Name it. Anything. Your steel mills have contracts with the city for building projects, schools, hospitals, public work. I want you to make sure that when those projects are built in Harlem, You hire local workers, people from the community, good wages, fair treatment. Can you do that? Blackstone looked genuinely confused. That's what you want? Jobs for Harlem residents? That's exactly what I want. Done. Absolutely done. But surely there's something else. Bumpy picked up the check that was still sitting on Blackstone's desk and handed it back to him. Keep your money, Mr. Blackstone. Just keep your word about the job. Theodore Blackstone stared at the check, then at Bumpy, completely bewildered. You risked your life, you saved my daughter. And you don't want anything for yourself? Mr. Blackstone, you came to Harlem today because you had a problem that money couldn't solve. You learned that there are other kinds of power besides bank accounts. Consider this a lesson in how the real world works. Bumpy turned to leave, then stopped. And Mr. Blackstone, your daughter is 19 years old. Maybe it's time you started treating her like an adult instead of a child. Let her make her own choices about music and friends. The more you try to control her, the more likely she is to rebel. And next time she rebels, you might not be lucky enough to get her back. 6 months later, Blackstone Steel began hiring exclusively from Harlem for their New York construction projects. Hundreds of jobs, good wages. Theodore Blackstone never explained to his board why he'd changed his hiring practices. He simply said it was good business. Vincent Torrino was found 3 weeks later in Los Angeles, working as a night security guard under an assumed name. He never returned to the East Coast. Catherine Blackstone finished her degree at Vassar, then opened a jazz club in Greenwich Village that became popular with the city's elite. She married her musician boyfriend 2 years later. Her father walked her down the aisle. The kidnapping never made the newspapers. The official report stated that Catherine had been recovered through private security measures, and the kidnappers had been discouraged from future activity. But in the circles that mattered, the real story spread quickly. The day a millionaire came to Harlem, asking for help. The day Bumpy Johnson solved a problem that the FBI couldn't handle. The day Theodore Blackstone III got down on his knees and thanked a man for saving his daughter's life. October 7th night, the day that proved power wasn't about how much money you had in the bank. It was about how many people respected you enough to help when everything else failed. And in Harlem, respect was the only currency that really mattered. Bumpy Johnson never asked for anything in return, except jobs for his community, because he understood something that took Theodore Blackstone a lifetime to learn. True power isn't about what you can take, it's about what you choose to give.